Welcome. Today we're going to paint the Marley Eco-tuff Barge Board. It's coming up. Okay, before we start painting, I just want to explain what a barge board is, because some of you might be new to roofing and you don't know all the roofing lingos yet. So a barge board is basically used at the end of a gable of your house to finish it off. Barge boards are usually made from fiber cement, but in this case, our Marley Eco-tuff Barge Board, which is much stronger by the way, is made from a plastic and wood composite. So you will notice that the surface of this barge board is quite smooth. So before we can start painting this, we need to sand it down. But I also just want to quickly go through all the tools that we'll basically need to do this. Whenever you do painting, make sure that you've got a drop sheet, and that's just to make sure that you don't spill, if you have any spills or any droplets, that you don't soil the surfaces. And I want to actually recommend that you use Marley Undertile membrane. This is an excellent drop sheet that you can use. Then obviously we're going to use our Marley M22 Ultimo. It's got a 15-year guarantee. It's a multi-surface paint. It's so good that you can actually even use it on paving. And we have used this paint before, so it's been stored for quite a while. So in that case, you also need something, a paddle, or you can actually buy these. You can screw them into a drill bit, and that is just to remix your paint, make sure that if anything is settled, it is well mixed before you start painting. We're also going to need a drum with some water and a cloth, some fine grit paper, and then I actually want to show you the difference between these two rollers. So because the surface is smooth, you want to go with a Mohair roller preferably. It's a short pile roller. It will provide a nice finish. You can also use a sponge roller, but I would rather recommend this. It gives a much nicer finish. All right, let's start.
Step 1. Sand the surface with a fine grit paper. Here we used Academy's 360 fine grit paper. You really do not have to sand very hard, and this process can easily be done on site by hand. But if you prefer, you can use a sanding machine as well. After sanding, wipe the barge board with a damp, not wet cloth to remove all dust particles and let it dry. Which was for us quite quick. It literally dried within 1 minute, holding it in the sunshine. With the barge board dried and ready to receive the first coat, we gave our paint another stir to ensure that everything is truly mixed well. This is especially important if you have, like us, used the paint on a previous project, stored it and is using it again. Pour just enough paint for your first coat, not over-pouring like I did. It will become clear later why this is a good idea. It is always a good idea to wet your rollers and brushes before painting. This will allow your roller or brush to absorb and release the paint evenly. But take care to shake and squeeze out as much water as possible so that you only have a damp roller or brush. When loading your roller or brush with paint, be careful to not overload the roller or brush, as this could affect the finish to look streaky with visible paint droplets, or even worse, result in uneven thick patches that will not dry well. As you can see, the sponge roller provides a nice smooth finish, but this kind of roller might not be ideal for contractors, simply because sponge rollers are not as tough or long-lasting as Mohair rollers. But if you are an eager DIYer doing this as a once-off paint job, it should be fine. Next up is the Mohair roller. As mentioned earlier, do not overload your roller like I did. As you can see, the roller is sliding, and as a result, I had to work the roller to spread the paint out to attain the correct first coat thickness. Despite this, the Mohair roller still provided a good finish. After finishing the first coat, we put the barge board on our Undertile membrane, used as a drop sheet here. to dry in the sun for an hour, whereafter we will return to check if it is touch dry. To prevent rollers and brushes from drying out whilst you wait in between coats, wrap them with plastic bags. This also works well if you are going to paint the next day. Just make sure that when you wrap them tightly so that there are no air pockets to dry them out. Now, as mentioned earlier, it would have been better to use less paint in the tray, but because I'm going to paint again in a few hours, I decided to leave the paint in the tray and just wrap the tray with a plastic bag. But please do not do this if you are only going to paint the next day. Rather decant back into the paint tin and wash the tray. After 4 hours of drying, our barge board is ready to receive its second and final coat. As you can see, the Mohair roller is still wet and ready to use, as is our sponge roller. And our paint was still okay after we removed the bag. When painting, ensure that you roll the roller in all directions. This will ensure that you cover the surface well and evenly. Also ensure that you paint the barge board edges, especially where the barge board has been cut and pre-drilled for fixing holes. This will ensure that the exposed open grain of these surfaces are sealed and protected against water ingress. Once again, place the barge board on the Undertile membrane and leave to dry for 4 hours. As you can see, the dried finish is perfect and even. But let's see how well Marley M22 adheres to the surface. The first test is a quick masking tape rip test. As you can see, the paint did not peel off when we ripped off the tape. Next test is a quick DIY cross hatch test. Using a sharp object, I scratched crisscross lines into the surface. Then, after I struggled and finally got hold of the tape, I applied the masking tape over the surface and pressed down hard so that it really stuck to the surface. So the idea of this test is that if you rip off the tape and no paint is stuck to the tape or has lifted, then the paint proves to have excellent adhesion. As you can see, Marley M22 Ultimo adheres perfectly to the surface, which means it can be used on a multitude of different surfaces, including paving, interior and exterior walls, and steel surfaces. Talking about steel surfaces, tune in again next time where we will show you how to prepare, prime and paint new galvanized surfaces.